Hello students, welcome to today's lecture which is on curriculum, methods of teaching, methods of evaluation, etc. of Buddhist education. Before we discuss the different objectives and aims and methods and curriculum and other aspects of Buddhist education, let us see what are the objectives of this topic. After going through the subject matter, the students would develop a general idea about ancient Indian educational system. Secondly, get detailed information about the different aspects of Buddhist education such as curriculum, methods of teaching and evaluation. Third, get acquainted with different terms used in the Buddhist educational system. Fourthly, get an idea about the impact of Buddhist education on the present educational system of India. Let us now discuss curriculum of Buddhist education. Buddhist curriculum was chiefly spiritual in nature. It was so because the chief aim of education was to attain salvation or nirvana. So, the study of religious philosophy of Lord Buddha was most important and thus compulsory. So, Tanta, Vinaya and Dhamma were the main subjects prescribed for such a study. This type of curriculum was meant only for monks. It said that education during this period could be classified into two parts, first primary and second higher. In primary education, emphasis was laid on the teaching of reading, writing and arithmetic, which we call 3 R's, while in higher education, religion, philosophy, military science, medicine, art, handicrafts, archery, geology, the science of taming and training animals, etc. were taught. According to Professor Bhatnagar, I quote him, educational syllabus in Buddhist period was of two kinds. The one, he says, is a religious syllabus and the second the material syllabus. The former comprehended the teaching of Vedas and Buddhist literature, while the latter paid attention to the material and physical needs of the society. It included training in such subjects as writing, arithmetic, spinning and weaving, printing and dyeing, stitching or tailoring, sculpture, art which included drawing and painting, music, agriculture, animal husbandry, etc. Besides these, comparative study of Vedic and Jain religions was also in practice. Regarding religious syllabus, Professor Bhatnagar says subjects like philosophy, logic, metaphysics, astrology, astronomy, axiology, administration, law and justice, polity were taught. Besides these subjects, Sanskrit and Pali languages were also taught to the students. Professor Mehta quotes Hemant Sang as having said, higher education of the monasteries may be best considered under two aspects. One, theoretical, concerning curricula and studies, and second, practical, concerning conduct and discipline. While primary education took the form of worldly materialistic education, the curriculum of higher education included a religious syllabus as well as worldly syllabus. He, that is Professor Mehta, is of the opinion that curriculum was expanded by the later followers of Buddhism and many practical subjects were included in it. So, in Buddhist monasteries, teaching learning of the following types of knowledge can be found. First, word knowledge. It includes an integration of word formation, etymology and knowledge of grammar. Second, knowledge of different crafts like spinning and weaving, painting, printing, dyeing, knitting, stitching, sculpture, agriculture and animal husbandry, etc. The third type is medical education, which includes knowledge of medicine, surgery and physiology. The fourth category is logic, which involves thinking and reasoning. Fifth is spiritual education. It includes the study of Buddhism, Vedic literature and a comparison of different philosophies with Buddhism. Sixth category was that of games and sports. In monasteries, there was a provision for games and sports and other physical exercises because, according to Buddhism, a healthy body and a healthy mind are considered essential for healthy ideas. The seventh category is the other subjects like commerce, elephant lore, archery, magic, knowledge of reviving the dead, knowledge of animal cries and sounds, prophecy, bodily gestures, military science, science of taming and training animals, geology, arithmetic and religious discussions were included in the curriculum. In early stages, the medium of instruction was Sanskrit. Later, Pali, that was the original folk language, was also adopted to impart education. Lord Buddha, it is said, stressed on adoption of Pali as the medium of instruction to develop a link with the masses. Buddhism gave an impetus to the study of the vernacular dialects in place of classical Sanskrit, though the study of Buddhist scriptures like Dhammapada and sutras was compulsory for all learners who studied in monasteries and vihars. It said that Buddhist institutions were not sectarian nor purely theological in their courses. Instead, other religions and philosophies were also studied. Now, those were the details about curriculum. Now, the second important aspect is methods of teaching. Buddhist education was universal and at the same time institutionalized. The art of writing had become common by the time of Lord Buddha, but the method of oral instruction still continued in the field of education as a legacy of Vedic and Brahmanic education. This might have been true due to the paucity or non-availability of writing materials. But still, the learning of art of writing was stressed to make it a means of earning a livelihood. This was, in a way, a vocational subject. Now, following is the brief description of some cheap methods of teaching which were in vogue during the Buddhist period. The first is oral method. This was the most popular method. Students were required to memorize the text, learn it by heart, and meditate on it. I.T. Sang says, I quote him, "The pupil read a portion of the scripture and reflected on what he has learned. He acquired new knowledge day by day and searched into old subjects month after month without losing even a minute." These were the 3 steps in the practice of wisdom. They are study, thought, and meditation. This is what was said by Mr. Sang. Thus, this method would comprise listening, comprehension, contemplation, recall, and recollection. Second important method is question-answer method. Since Buddhism was a new religion, it was necessary to propagate it. Its successful propagation depended on the propagator's knowledge and his skill to answer the questions asked by a person. It's said that question-answer method was very dominant, even when other methods and techniques had come into existence. Pupils were trained in asking questions which would be brief and quite pointing, and the teacher was expected to give a pointing and satisfactory answer to these questions. The success of this method would depend on the quality of the question and the way it would be answered. Now, the third very important method in Buddhist education was debates and discussions. Along with the question-answer method, stress was laid on debates and discussions, reasoning, analysis, explanation, and exposition. During Buddhist age, students were trained in the art of asking questions and debating from the very beginning of the academic career. In this way, they developed clarity of vision through discussion on different problems of life. They had to be proficient in the art of discussing things in order to convince and satisfy those followers of Buddhism who had any doubts. However, in Buddhist literature, rules were laid for such discussions, in that discussions would be done on some useful topic at a proper place, like an assembly of learned people, a royal palace, or a parishad. The debater was expected to have a thorough knowledge of the topic, as also the skill to answer the questions to the best satisfaction of the person who asked. The fourth method is direct method. In Buddhist system of education, direct method of teaching was adopted because the teacher and the students dwelt in the monasteries together. That is, they lived there together. The teacher would suggest a lesson to them and the students would learn it by heart. The teacher would proceed further only after having ascertained thorough memorization and comprehension of the lesson by the pupils. The pupils could directly also come in contact with a new and exploratory topic and would dwell on it, of course, seeking help from the teacher. The fifth method is interpretation method. Here, learning material was presented in the form of sutras or formula, which were interpreted by the teacher. The students would raise their doubts in between and the teacher would remove them. Any new item of knowledge would be analyzed and interpreted quite intelligently, jointly by the teacher and the pupils. In this way, their knowledge and comprehension could be confirmed. The sixth method is meditation method. This method was adopted by certain Buddhist monks who dwelt in the solitude of forests and realized supreme knowledge, as they called it, through meditation. It is said that this method was not suitable for ordinary students. Instead, very courageous, brave, talented, and utterly dedicated students would attempt such endeavors. A child would get admitted to the monastery only when he was 8+. At the time of admission, a simple ceremony was performed which was called Pabaja ceremony. The word Pabaja implies going out or renouncing all the worldly and family connections. An individual belonging to any caste could be admitted to a monastery, and after joining the Sangha, he did not belong to any caste. For Pabaja, the individual had to get his head fully shaved and put on yellow clothes. On doing so, he was presented before the presiding bhikshu, who would accept his request, admit him, and administer some basic advices to him. The child would study in the Sangha for 12 years, and then, after going through the Upasampada ceremony, would become a full-fledged member of the Sangha and would be called the Samner or the Sarman, that is, monk. Teacher and students together had to observe the same code of conduct. If a student disobeyed or violated this code of conduct, he was expelled from the institution, and this was called niskasan. The preceptor, that is the teacher, had the power to expel a student when he realized that the student did not have right regard and devotion for him. After having studied for 12 years, the student had to undergo Upasampada ceremony, wherein the student had to present himself in front of all monks. One could be admitted for this ceremony only when majority of the monks voted in favor of him. After this ceremony, the Sraman became a full-fledged member or monk of the monastery. On becoming a monk, he had to sever all his worldly as well as family relationships. Now, something about the teacher. The Buddhist teacher was a man of qualities. He was pious, religious, and spiritual. His preeminence was primarily accepted in the spiritual realm. The teachers were not only ideal men of character, but also men of great learning. They lived a simple and clean life. The teachers were of two types. One, acharyas, and the second, upadhyayas. Acharyas were those who were profound scholars and original thinkers. Upadhyayas had a higher authority than acharyas. They were the custodians of main teaching and learning process. Both the teacher and the students were answerable to the Buddhist order. But regarding education, food, clothing, and residence of the student, the teacher was wholly responsible. He was also responsible for any treatment of the student whenever he fell ill. He bestowed all his affection and love to his students and took care of him in all respects. Now, a few words about the examinations and accreditation. There was no formal examination and certification system in Buddhist education. Success in real life situations was the test of one's efficiency and effectiveness of education. After receiving education for 12 years in the monastery or the vihar, the teacher used to give some pieces of advice to the students for their happy future life and for the welfare of the society. Now, something about organization and management of Buddhist education. There was no formal administration and supervisory system in Buddhist education. But at the same time, the system of education was well organized by the Buddhist order. Self-imposed restrictions on the part of all concerned made the system most disciplined and thus effective. Major role in managing the system was played by the teacher. The life and education of children was quite economical. Living and dietary habits were simple and non-luxurious. Begging of alms and receipt of dakshina from the community were the main sources of income. The system was therefore devoid of any kind of budgeting and allocation of funds from any government of the type of present times or any other organization. Well, students, with this we conclude today's topic. Thank you very much for listening.